Organizations are leveraging iland cloud services because of the scalability, flexibility, and agility that cloud offers. Cloud brings a new pay-as-you-consume cost model, which greatly benefits the customer, but only if it is right-sized for what you need. Undersize your cloud services and you could have systems running suboptimally or not at all, and not allocating enough space could cause backups or replication to fail. If you over-provision, you end up paying for more than you need or use. Whether simply backing up to the cloud, running disaster recovery in the cloud, or a full data center migration, understanding what you need from a performance and capacity need is essential to making the right investment in your cloud-based solution. iland Catalyst is a free, lightweight analysis tool that will inventory your available virtual infrastructure and help you answer that question of how much do you need? Installation and configuration of iland Catalyst is a pretty straightforward thing. You download the bundle, extract it, and then once you open it, just run the executable. iland Catalyst will not install any DLLs or require any registry entries and doesn't install itself into program files, so it's a very lightweight application. Once you run the application, the listener service will be opened up in the background, listening on port 8080, and then it'll open up a web browser. Go ahead and acknowledge the Catalyst software disclaimer, and then we need to put in our virtual center credentials. All you need is a username and password of a user who has read permissions to your virtual center environment. If you have multiple virtual centers, we'll show you how to add those later. Once you've authenticated, you're brought to the Catalyst main page. In the upper left, you can see the Virtual Center inventory, which will expand to show you all of your resource groups as well as your virtual machines that are in that virtual center. You can add additional virtual centers here, and you can swap between them by clicking on this dropdown. Clicking on the Infrastructure Overview tab will give you an idea of the number of hosts, the number of virtual machines, the amount of RAM, the amount of storage you have in the selected virtual center. Over here on the right, we have the speed test nodes, which gives you an indication of the connectivity between yourself and the global iland data centers. And lastly, we have the virtual machine groups. This allows you to group virtual machines together and see the impact that backup, disaster recovery, or migration will have based on the virtual machines that you select. Before we select virtual machines to analyze, the first thing we want to do is check bandwidth connectivities to each of the different iland global data centers. Whether for data sovereignty or you're just looking for a new site, it's very important to run these bandwidth tests against the different data centers so you get an understanding of how long it may take to back up or do replication to it, or what the bandwidth to your site is going to be for your infrastructure. You can see over here the latency from when you first launch the application, but we want to get a bandwidth test for each of these different data centers. Click on Run Speed Test, choose the data center that you're interested in, and then click Run Test. Once that finishes, you'll get a better understanding of the bandwidth between your site and the data center. This becomes important later when we actually start looking at backups and disaster recovery for seed times and differential times. Once you've run all the speed tests to all the different data centers that you're interested in, you'll notice that they show up here in the virtual machine groups. Virtual machine groups are groups of selected resources that allow you to see what is needed for different tiers of your environment. For example, you may have a tier of virtual machines that you're going to be backing up at a much greater frequency than others, or you need to determine a phased approach to disaster recovery and cloud-based hosting. By grouping virtual machines into groups, you can see how adding or removing virtual machines changes the overall requirements for the services you're looking at. You can modify the name of any virtual machine group here, or you can delete them, and we can also add additional ones by clicking here. Whichever virtual machine groups you're selecting will be highlighted in blue, and that will allow you to add resources to it. To add resources, go up into your virtual center inventory, and here you can add resource groups or individual virtual machines. If you want to add a resource group, click the resource group and it'll add everything to the selected machine group, or click on each virtual machine that you want to add individually. So I can add these virtual machines to this virtual machine group. I can select this new virtual machine group and then add the additional ones. You'll notice that the information for the number of virtual machines, the amount of CPU, RAM, and storage will update as you add virtual machines. You can also add virtual machines from any of your different virtual centers into the same virtual machine group. When determining the amount of storage needed for cloud-based backup, there are many factors to consider. How often are you backing up the selected virtual machines, and how long do you need to keep the data around for? Once you have the virtual machine selected that you want to back up, the next thing to do is actually change the retention policy to match that for the backups that you expect to run. For example, on this virtual machine group, maybe we want to keep 1 daily, 4 weeklies, and 6 monthlies, and you'll notice it'll update the recommended storage, and that includes all of the deduplication, forever incremental, and workspace. And you can find that information here by clicking on the information icon. You can also see under bandwidth the estimated time that it's going to take for each of the data centers that you've selected to do the first initial seed, as well as any differentials. This allows you to make sure that you can meet the backup window with the bandwidth that you have. We can change the policy on this other one, and you'll see the recommended storage numbers. Now you can also add the same virtual machine to multiple virtual machine groups so that you can get a different understanding of the amount of space consumed if you try different retention policies. Cloud-based disaster recovery allows organizations to adhere to their business continuity and data protection plans without the headache of a secondary site and duplicate hardware. It's always a challenge, though, in understanding how much you're going to need, both from storage consumption and resource consumption if you fail over. Island Catalyst easily breaks that information down for you. Here you can see the virtual machines that we selected before. I can see the number of virtual machines, the amount of CPU, memory, and storage. And on top of that, if I fail over, I can know roughly about how much of those resources are consumed, as disaster recovery is usually a burst when needed service. And again, over here you can see in the bandwidth how much time it's expected to initially seed the replication copy, and then any differentials that you have going on. Now, different replication technologies will require a different amount of overhead, and that can be estimated based on the technology that you're using. As organizations move existing infrastructure to the cloud, there are a number of questions you need to ask yourself. Which servers are needed? How much capacity do I need? And how much do I need in the way of resources to run these? Unlike disaster recovery, where you really only pay for the resources when you bring it up, infrastructure as a service means you're running that infrastructure all the time. So you want to make sure that you right size it for performance reasons as well as for pricing. Just like before, you can see the number of virtual machines, the amount of CPU and memory, the amount of storage, but you can also see the average utilization of the CPU and the amount of memory that you're using. This again helps you from over provisioning if those systems really aren't even using the resources you've got allocated to them. Once you've created the various virtual machine groups and understand your cloud backup needs and your disaster recovery needs and your infrastructure needs, the only thing left is to go ahead and send the report to iland. Click on the Submit Report button, fill out your information and submit it, and this will help iland have a much deeper understanding of your environment for the next steps you want to take.